What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction, and here we are with the Dwaraka Underwater Mystery Explained from the channel Keerthi History. And before we can dive into this, if you happen to enjoy it, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. And if you would like to support the channel by becoming a member, you will get access to exclusive benefits that I think you'll enjoy, and the link to that will be in the description section.
Krishna real nahi hai. Mahabharata and all sab bagwas hai. It's just mythology. There's a huge difference between mythology and history. How many times have we heard this? But do you know, few decades back, Indian archaeologists found a submerged city in the exact same place where Dwaraka is said to have been existed according to Mahabharata. Yes, Dwaraka, the same exact city which was built by Lord Krishna himself. But at the same time, a lot of false information about Dwaraka have been spreading across the internet, which portrays the magnificent Krishna statue on a huge palace as the archaeological remains of Dwaraka, which is not true at all. So what are the archaeological findings and what is that trying to establish? Let's analyze. According to Mahabharata, Dwaraka was a fortified city which was spread across 84 kilometers, and it was situated at a point where Gomati River and Arabian Sea meet. After the death of Lord Krishna, this ancient city was submerged by sea, and this was witnessed by Arjuna. To this day, Dwaraka is still one among the prominent pilgrimage sites in India. But what we need to establish here is Dwaraka is not just religiously important but also archaeologically significant. The excavation of Dwaraka is the most important archaeological excavation happened in the 20th century. Those who don't know, there's a 1,000-year gap in the history of ancient India. We don't know what exactly happened after the decline of Harappan civilization and before the emergence of Buddha. And this excavation of Dwaraka filled that empty space. The first archaeological excavation of Dwaraka was conducted by the Deccan College of Pune in 1963. They excavated around the outside walls of the Dwarkadish temple, and they published a report in 1963 where it was clearly established that the present Dwaraka is minimum 2000 years old. In fact, they went on to an extent saying, from our observation of the various places in and around Dwaraka, as also from the evidence of excavation, one can definitely say that this is the Dwaraka mentioned in the Mausala Parva of the Mahabharata, the Dwaraka Mahatmya of the Skanda Purana, and other Puranas, and the Gatachataka. This particular excavation.
So this is no mythology. This is actually history. Dwaraka actually existed and was actually submerged under sea, and there's archaeological proof that it was there. It was where it was supposed to be, and it was submerged underwater. That's awesome. That's crazy to think about. 2,000 years ago. My brain can't even fathom that. That's incredible.
And by the Deccan College of Pune was the first serious effort made to determine the antiquity of Dwaraka and to find out whether it could be considered as Krishna's Dwaraka or not. Without any doubt, they established that the modern Dwaraka is at least 2000 years old. But it created a much bigger problem. According to their conclusion, Dwaraka was built after the Mauryan period. But as per the literary and inscriptional references, Mahabharata happened at least in the 6th century, if not earlier. That means minimum 8,000 years back. However, they agreed that this conclusion is based on the findings of that particular excavation, and there is still a huge possibility of finding evidences which could be much older. So the archaeologists wanted to do a new excavation on land close to the Dwarkadish temple. But to do that, the modern buildings nearby the temple need to be removed, which is not at all an easy task. Before moving forward, if you're someone who's preparing for government exams or want to learn history in an engaging way, I would highly suggest you to check out the UPSC Power Bank of Oswald books, which covers the ancient and medieval history. It's 100% updated with thousands of answers correct. The same version. If you're someone looking for a topic, in 1979, after 16 years from the first excavation, archaeologist S.R. Rao got an opportunity to excavate Dwaraka. He managed to pull down a panchayat office nearby the Dwarkadish temple. After the demolition, they were clearing out the place. At that time, few sculptures of 19th century were recovered and a stone platform was found. What do we usually expect when we demolish a building? There'll just be land, right? If we excavate it, we may find some ancient artifacts. artifacts. But here, after pulling down that building, they found a stone platform covering something underneath. At first, the archaeologists hesitated to remove that, but after much hesitation, they removed it, and what they found under that stone was so shocking. They found remains of a well-preserved temple of Vishnu which belonged to the 9th century. That temple had a garbhagriha, a corridor, an assembly hall, and a small porch. And when excavated further, right under this temple, they found another temple which is much older. And under the foundation of the second temple, they found remains of another temple which is much older than the earlier two. So they demolished the Panchayat office and found the remains of 3 temples layered one by one. And they also found a huge rectangular stone structure which at first they thought could be a well, but later they found out it's not a well but in fact a secret passage which was mentioned in the Puranas. This secret passage was connected through the Kusheshwar Mahadev temple with the Dwarkadish temple. And while pulling down a modern wall, they found beautifully carved pillars of another huge temple which belonged to the 12th century. The 3 temples found earlier were destroyed by the sea, but this one, the 4th temple, was destroyed due to vandalism by the enemies. Finally, from this particular excavation, they found out there were totally 8 Dwarakas, including the current one. The time period of first Dwaraka could be between 16th to 15th century, which means anywhere around 3,500 years old. And the evidence for this was the lustrous redware found in the excavation. The second Dwaraka could belong to anywhere between 900 to 500 BCE, which means minimum 2,500 years old. And the evidence for this were the house floors and thin black on red wares. The third Dwaraka might have existed anywhere between 2nd century BCE and 6th century AD, which means anywhere around 1,500 to 2,200 years old. And the evidence for this was the temple found in the last layer. Fourth Dwaraka might belong to 7th to 8th century AD, which means around 1,300 years old. And the evidence for this was the temple which was found in the second layer.
It's so crazy to think like the civilizations that existed and everything that existed before we came along. Like, it's fascinating for us to find these artifacts and to find these temples and to be able to date them back that far. I think is absolutely incredible. But to think that there was life way back when, and it's like, I know history tells us and everything, but it's just still fascinating to like dig up artifacts of things, of temples, of anything that existed back then. It's mind-blowing and fascinating to me.
The Dwaraka might have existed between 8th to 12th century, which means around 1,000 years old. And the evidence for this was the temple which was found in the first layer after the destruction of that Panchayat office. 6th Dwaraka might have existed in 12th century, which means 800 years old. And the evidence for this was the 4th temple which was vandalized by the enemies. The 7th Dwaraka may belong anywhere between 13th to 15th century, which means around 700 years old. And the evidence for this was the inner and outer portions of the Dwarkadish temple. Finally, 8th Dwaraka is the modern township we have right now, and it might have started after the 16th century. This onshore excavation, which was done on land, proved without any doubt that Dwaraka is minimum 3,500 years old and it was destroyed by the ocean. Mahabharata and Puranas say Dwaraka was built by Krishna and then it was swallowed by the sea. If there is any truth in this, there should be at least few buildings buried in the seabed. To find out that, it's important to carry out a marine excavation, which means researching in the ocean. But the time we are talking about is 1980s, 40 years back from now. And marine archaeology is not an easy task. You need archaeologists, historians, oceanographers, geologists, divers, underwater photographers, and a lot of the technicians. Even today, the Archaeological Survey of India is not funded enough. Imagine 40 years back, and this is going to be the first marine excavation for India. There were no archaeologists who could dive in the sea, and the few available local divers were completely ignorant of archaeological procedures. And there was no agency to fund the marine archaeological studies at that time. Finally, after a lot of struggles, they managed to arrange 80,000 rupees. Thus, the first marine excavation of Dwaraka started in 1983. From then, 12 marine excavations were done in and around Dwaraka, till 1992. In all these underwater excavations, they found a lot of artifacts like seal, wall structures, iron objects, brass objects, potteries, stone objects like blades, stool, anchors, particularly triangular shaped 3-hole anchors were found. After all the research, they found out that Dwaraka is not just a single town but a city-state which includes many towns.
Dang.
And there was also a huge port where trading used to happen. Now, is there any way we can claim that this Dwaraka found underwater is the same Dwaraka built by Krishna himself? To find out that, S.R. Rao, the chief archaeologist who carried out the Dwaraka excavation, compares the evidence collected from the excavation with the writings of Mahabharata and other Puranas. The location and physical features of the island bed Dwaraka matches very closely with the place called Kusastali in Mahabharata. The 30 to 40 meter wooded hill in bed Dwaraka matches with the Raivataka hill referred in Mahabharata. After the submergence, Dwaraka is described as the citadel in water. As per this description, we found fort walls along the seashore and submerged walls in the sea. And 6
Dang, so are they? I know she said there's been 12 marine excavations and then they stopped. Is there ever going to be any more that are done to find any more of Dwaraka? Like, because now I'm fascinated at, I feel like that's very interesting. It's just, like I said, it's crazy to know, like, find artifacts and find evidence and proof of humanity that existed before us. It's insane. That's awesome.
fortified structures were found in the ocean, and these structures matches well with the description of Dwaraka city in the Skanda Purana. And as mentioned in Mahabharata, Dwaraka was highly civilized with engineering skills, advanced technology, and high literacy of the people. Hereby, archaeologist S.R. Rao confirms that Dwaraka is not an exaggeration or myth, but was a city in real sense. But the question is, it's been 30 years since it's found. How many of us were taught about this in our schools? Our archaeologists proved that Dwaraka, the city built by Lord Krishna himself, existed exactly the way it's described in Mahabharata, the great epic of India, which is always being ridiculed as mythology. Why the hell none of us are talking about it? Is it really just left out casually, or is it being hidden intentionally? Obviously, the media doesn't care. The government is not spending enough on archaeology. The least we could do is spreading the information which were proven evidentially. I think it's high time for us to reclaim our lost identity.
Yeah, it is. God dang it. That was incredible. Like I said, that's truly fascinating and mind-blowing. This city found underwater, the city-state found underwater, and it matches the description that of the city in from the Mahabharata. I hope I'm saying that right. But I mean, it's evidence right there. How much more evidence do you need? They found the artifacts. They found it down there. It matches up with what was written in the Mahabharata. So, shout out to Keerthi History for teaching me something today. That's all we have for this video. If you guys enjoyed that, check out this one next. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. See you guys on the next one.